Hi, this is Mark Arnold with yet another episode of the Fun Ideas podcast. And today we have a returning guest. And this time I believe he's on video for the first time because I think we did an audio podcast a few years ago. And this is cartoonist extraordinaire and pal of mine. We've done podcasts together and a lot of stuff over the years. I've known him probably 40 years or something. Jeez.
Probably
Anyway,
so, yeah.
but I was a fan even longer than that, the Hanna-Barbera comics back in the 70s. But anyway, here he is, Scott Shaw. Woo!
Whoa.
So how are you?
All the balloons go up in the
Yeah,
back.
yeah. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I recently finished the my half of the Svengoolie comic that's coming out in a couple of weeks.
Mhm.
Um, I did a color piece for the cartoonist for Kamala uh, thing that Bill Morrison's been doing, and it'll be coming up, I think, on the 20th or the 25th. I'm not sure the date, but they're going to auction them all off and then send more money to Kamala's, production. So, um, and I just finished the T-shirt for Comic Fest, which is in late October in San Diego.
Very cool.
So I'm finally back doing my own thing. Today I've been working on a new strip um, for Eric Larson in Image. I'm going to do a one shot with that little dragon character, which I really created as kind of a little Archie version of Savage Dragon, just because Eric does everything possible to change this strip every few years, and I thought we'll do a one shot. And Bob Bowling was actually willing to do it, but at the time he said this isn't going to sell, and he still says this isn't going to sell, but I'll give you as many copies as you want to sell at shows. And I thought, okay, now that's worth it.
Well, I mean, we got to cherish these people when they're around. Now, did Bob actually do the work, or do you just
No,
want to
he
do the
never
work?
did. No, this was
Oh,
like
okay,
maybe
okay.
10 years ago when I
Oh, I
was
see. Okay.
not doing it. But then out of the blue, Eric came back and said, because I'd already done a short story for him as a backup story, he said, we can reprint that
Yeah.
and you can do a new story or whatever you want to do with it. And he's kind of left me alone. And I'm finally at the stage where I can finally have time to do it. So it introduces a whole new team of superhero animals led by Captain Ferret.
Wow.
DC.
Carrot to
So
ferret.
he's the only character that's that obvious, but I did take the same attitude with new weird characters like Hydropotamus and the missing links. You know, new gimmicky characters, so and making them easier to draw and faster to draw, which is good.
So you apparently seem to keep as busy as you always have, right? It seems like doing a
Yeah,
lot of projects.
and sooner or later I've got a cover I've got to color too. So
Right. And you did a cover for me, which I don't know where we were at. I'm not even working on that book at the present time, a TV cartoons book, but I appreciate
I've
your work so far on it. So
I've got all the reference for coloring it, so I'm ready to go whenever you are.
very cool. All right. Well, the subject for today's show is really odd, and I kind of briefed you on it prior to this. And I tend to use this podcast to do double duty, where hey, I can interview friends and put you on and everything, and I can also, transcribe these interviews and put them in print. So this is for Back Issue Magazine. They're going to do an all ape or all gorilla or whatever you want to issue uh probably almost a year from now. you know and it has this, the stuff you would expect from DC and Marvel and things, Gorilla Grodd or whatever. I don't know who's doing what stories. I'd have to look it up, but they had a little what the thing, and You-All Gibbons and Scott Shaw, and the assignment went out, and they said, "Who wants to do this?" And I said, "I'll do the one with Scott Shaw. I know Scott, and I'd like to talk to him about it." So
Now
here we are.
I'll look forward to that issue because I just bought I came out maybe last year, a collection of nothing but all of the Detective Chimp stories. When I was a kid, that's why I collected Rex the Wonder Dog, because I like that chimp.
Hmm. It's too bad that they
It
don't
certainly didn't look
publish.
like a chimp because Carmine Infantino never bothered to look at animals when he drew them. He just did his own version.
So I guess in the case of you all given, I know you have the love for the apes. You've shown them in your oddball comics and showed that DC did a lot of purple apes among other things.
When I
But
was a kid, um, I didn't know that that was a plan, but the one thing, if I had the money, I'd buy any comic with a gorilla or a dinosaur on the cover. And sometimes they were terrible, and sometimes they really were worth the money, like Conan Monarch of Monster Isle, for example. It had gorillas and dinosaurs and everything else. But yeah, as a kid, I those were the two things I was most interested in, is
mhm.
jungle animals and dinosaurs.
Now, was I guess that love the reason why you created a such character as you all given? Is that how? I mean, was it
Well,
as simple as that, or?
I'll tell you how I created them because it's interesting. I was uh, when I was 14. I mean, I've had a relationship with the San Diego Zoo since I was like 3 years old. But when I was 14, I became the president of the Junior Zoological Society for the San Diego Zoo. And um, then my dad got me a job as a groundskeeper where I had a little picker and a burlap sack and I just put all the trash in there. Well, when I was doing that job, a guy that was a noted health nut, no pun intended, um, was a guy named You-All Gibbons. And he was advertising cereal at the time. He was in a lot of commercials.
Mhm.
And when I was there one day, he showed up at the zoo and was walking around handing people acorns. And I didn't see anything behind him saying, "Here, you have to promote your cereal." I think he just did that to impress people. And so, yeah, I had that nut for quite a while. And then when I was offered to work on this new comic called Quack that Mike Friedrich came up with immediately after uh, Frank Brunner started doing the Howard the Duck comics,
Mhm.
and immediately made him the star of the book, drawing Howard the Duck just with a different name.
Right.
It was not very creative, but I always like doing funny, stupid stuff. And I thought, I kept thinking about You-All Gibbons, and I thought, well, I could have a gibbon. That's a monkey. I liked watching the gibbons at the zoo because they were very acrobatic. And I thought, well, what if instead of health food, he likes junk food? Just eats all the crap. And so that's how I came up with You-All Gibbon, the junk food monkey.
Mhm.
And I mean, it was a very flimsy concept. No two ways about it, but I milked it because I figured, well, this guy's an idiot, so he can just wander into different situations. And
Right.
and I also really disliked John Denver for some reason. I don't know why, but I didn't like I well I at that point I think my first wife liked John Denver and I did that to piss her off. So I forget what I called him, but he was like an orangutan.
Let's see a
So that was
face.
that was his nephew. I figured species go out the window when you're doing funny animals.
Right.
So and then I put a character in there that I used a lot after that was a parody of Hunter Thompson,
Hmm.
a, Pointer Toxin, and so the three of them went into adventures. But I mean, I think the first issue kind of just established him, and they went into the jungle to find some idol or something. The second one, I had him fight um, like giant boars,
Yeah.
and big and I think the Pig Boy was in those too, I think.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then it became like a continued story that I never finished for Quack, but years later, um, Pacific Comics, the Shanus brothers called me, and I guess somebody that they printed their comics, four different comics at the same time at the printer.
Hmm.
They had four slots, and somebody had flaked out on them, and they needed something to fill in so they could print the comic, all the comics.
Hmm.
So I had that book that Sergio and I were going to print ourselves until we found out that we didn't have the money to print it. And it just kind of sat in our drawer for a while. And I thought, well, hey, I could just finish this and that, and it'll be done. I hired a guy to ink some of it who had done a comic himself called Cutie Bunny,
Yeah.
and he inked a little bit of the final story. And then they printed it in color. Gordon Kent colored it over a weekend, who was a great guy in animation, but he also was the colorist on Groove for a while, the early issues. And the funniest thing about that was nobody had really promoted it at Pacific. And it was an anthology of funny animals. Sergio was in it. A few, Rick Geary did something for it. So there were, artists that were, worth collecting, but um, I think they printed the same number as all the other comics. I don't know what the print was, how big it was. But for many years, going back a bit, my first comic I ever did was called Gory Stories, that had my character, the turd, in it.
Hmm.
And it got reprinted so many times it finally was being used as packing material so the actual comics that they ordered wouldn't get bent up moving around in the box. Ken Kruger did that when he was at Pacific.
Yeah.
This book didn't sell that well either, so then that became the thing that put in boxes too.
Yeah.
It was like my comic was worthless to Pacific.
And that
They
was
asked me,
Wild Animals #1. Was that what it was?
yeah, they never
Yeah.
even asked me
Yeah.
if I'd like the copies to sell myself. It was like, no, we'll
Wow.
just throw them away. So, welcome to how the wonderful world of comics and how well you get your friends.
Yes. Well, I will tell you, I bought that off this at the comic store way back when. I bought Gru, and I pretty much ignored all the other Pacific titles. I think I did get Twisted Tales because that was very good. So, but yeah.
They started out with some remarkably good books, but I could never figure out, are these guys crooks or are they just incompetent? I got along well with the guys, although one time years later, after they Pacific was gone, and now they were shifted over to a thing called Blackthorn,
Oh yeah.
and they had a deal with the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, which didn't ever happen, or at least America never was involved with it. But they had a mascot named Vushko the Fox, and
Yeah, I
Vushko
remember
looked like
that.
a Jay Ward character.
Yeah, I remember that.
And they wanted to do a comic of it, and I said, I know nothing about sports, but I love this design. So I
Mhm.
did, I don't know, 3 or 4 pages just as samples to show the copyright owners what I was thinking of. And then, of course, America never got involved, so there was no point in making the comic.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, yeah, but I did 4 pages for you guys. And it was kind of like, well, it never happened. So, it's like, so I wasn't being a jerk about it, but I thought, well, I hear about this. Let's try this. I went down one day, and I was moved to LA by that time. I came in and I thought, I'm just going to sit in the lobby and chat with people. And after they ask me why I'm there, I say, well, I did a job for them 2 years ago, and I'm still waiting to get paid. And after about 20 minutes of that, somebody ran out and gave me a check. It was,
I think the comic book industry is not totally that way. My dad did a very similar thing. that he was wanting payment for, he sold computers and computer parts back when they're the size of refrigerators. And there was one client that wasn't paying him. So he literally sat in the lobby just like you did until they finally came out with a check. So, yeah.
I worked on a project that I don't think ever got actually on the air, but it was an extension of that Ranger Danger show where it was kind of like teaching kids how to avoid problems. And they were all funny animal characters. And the show was easy to do, and we were all had, people that were supporting us.
Mhm.
Suddenly it just hit a wall, and I had already done like half a show. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to start calling him. And instead of being angry like I usually am, I'm going to start acting concerned that receptionists didn't get paid that week. And I put it in her head that we're not getting paid. You better watch out. You might be getting not be getting paid too. And suddenly I got a check for the whole thing, and I hadn't even finished it. It was like just
Wow.
shut back up.
Good for you. Now, back to You-All Gibbon. We'll be jumping around a bit. So you did this Scott Shaw's Comics and Stories in Recent Times that kind of compiles like all your early work for the most part. I mean, does it have everything in there? I mean, obviously it has like You-All Gibbon. There it is. That's probably the one from
I
uh
I think
Quack
it's
number
got
one.
most of my stories, but I found recently some more pages from that Gorgonzola, the Godzilla parody I did in high school.
Oh yeah.
Um, I'm going to be doing another one of those, and I'm also going to be doing one that is essentially um, not the finished product, but just my artwork.
Mm,
And that way I can start putting all the stuff I did for the studios.
mm,
Because as long as it's not the final thing, and I'm just talking about this is my art and this is the stage where it ended for me, you can do that.
mm. Okay, so
So,
it's like roughs of like Fred and Barney or whatever, whatever it
or
would
the
maybe.
stuff I put up online with its, finished art, but it's still not colored or whatever, but you can see all those, I mean, I've also found some stuff I never finished that I want to finish.
Yeah.
Here's one right here that I found that's 15 things that may or may not be true about Sergio.
Now, was that done for anything, or was it just
I
done for fun? I mean,
I
where,
think
what?
I just did it for fun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got a 2-pager of that. I've got, I don't know, about a 10-pager of kind of a J Ward version of Jack and the Beanstalk.
Yeah,
I've got a lot of projects I started and then, on my own and then started getting paid for stuff. And it's like, oh, that goes to the side. I got to make
yeah.
money.
I'm about that last page. I'm wondering if Mad would take it. I know they're reprint for the most part, but like the next issue, I think they're going to do like half new material. So I'm wondering if if you convinced them, they
Well,
might put it in
I
there.
was
So
never invited to Mad, although I've appeared in Mad many times,
yes.
drew me. Like he finally got tired of doing it, I think, because people were asking him, "Who the hell is that guy?" So,
Oh, well, I recognized you. Well, I knew Sergio when you were friends or are friends,
yeah, we're
so
still very close friends, but when
yeah,
he did all those Star Wars things, and
yeah.
then collected them into all the book that was all Mad Star Wars stuff,
Mhm.
they actually had to explain because I was in so many of his cartoons in the Star Wars. I had to explain, no, this is a cartoonist that's a friend of Sergio's, and he just does this to amuse his friend.
I guess I never saw it that way because I know who you are, so it didn't phase me. I go, hey, there's Scott in the comic again. Big deal.
He even put my dad in one of them.
Oh, that's
Where
funny.
it was this little gag at the zoo. Yeah.
So, let's see. I'm supposed to be asking you about these ape things and stuff like that. Um, Let me ask you this. So you have this ape that I've seen before many times. Is that, see, I thought that was You-All Gibbon until I looked to the book again. I go, oh yeah, it's the other one because he has the big floofy hair, like the real You-All Gibbons. So
That's
um
actually a character that was inspired by something Sergio told me.
Okay.
Um, he said, "You like gorillas?" I
Yeah.
said, "Why don't you do a gorilla that's kind of the reverse of Tarzan?" And I thought, okay, so it's a gorilla that lives in the city. He can be his secret identity. He's just in the zoo in San Diego. And then when at night or when everybody's asleep, he gets up and dresses up like a human and goes and helps out all the animals in trouble in the city.
Okay. So is that considered urban gorilla, this character too? I mean, you have.
That's me as urban gorilla.
Oh,
So
okay, got it. Okay, because yeah, you know, a lot of
that,
gorilla pictures, but I'm not sure if they're the same character or different ones. They seem like variants on the same thing because I know you like the gorillas. So,
I actually pitched urban gorilla to NBC's head of children's programming,
uh-huh.
and about a third of the way into my pitch, she turned to her assistant and said, "Where are we having lunch?" And I said, "Well, thank you very much, ladies," and walked out of the room. They did not
Wow.
like urban gorilla.
Aw. Interesting. Um, well, I guess what started your love for gorillas and apes? I mean, is it because they have kind of similarities to dinosaurs, or you do you like
Well,
all just kind of large animals in general, or what's your.
I think there's a couple of reasons. One is in that book. When I was uh, probably 2 years old, and we lived in New York when my dad was in the Navy, the assistant to an admiral there. I didn't know this, but for many years, up until I was in my mid 30s, I'd have dreams of being in a big room with a whale hanging over my head. And it was like the weirdest dream. And I probably dreamed that every month at least.
Yeah.
Then when I went back to DC when I was working on Captain Carrot, we went there for a brainstorm thing. And so I definitely wanted to go to the Museum of Natural History because I'd never been there. At least I didn't think so.
Hmm.
And I went in and I see this whale hanging over my head. When I was a kid, it was taxidermy. Now it's like made out of plastic, so it won't
Right.
stink. But I almost fell down because suddenly it all came together.
Hmm.
And I think that had a lot to do with why I liked Paul Bunyan, um, dinosaurs, giant animals in general. But the other thing is, I was in California. They have this thing called the GATE program,
Hmm.
and they still have it, and it's for kids that are intelligent and creative. But back then, it was really just kind of find all the kids that were smart and give them lots of math and science so they can kill the communists. I mean, one of my friends is a retired teacher, and her mom was a teacher, and we were in the same program, and that's how I found out about because her mom told her, "Well, you're not doing this for anything. They just want you to become a scientist so you can come up with a method to kill the communists." And so, um, if but I loved monsters. In the late 50s, that's when shock theater came on TV, and it was like taboo, but I'd get up in the middle of the night and turn it on without the sound on just to watch it real close so my parents wouldn't see me doing it. And to me, it was like dinosaurs, real giant animals, that stuff they let us talk about in school.
Hmm.
So I really leaned into it. And for a long time, I wanted to be, now this is ridiculous. I knew I wanted to be a cartoonist from a time I was probably 3 years old. I think most cartoonists kind of have that in it.
Yeah.
Even if they don't recognize it, it's kind of throbbing inside your head. Um, but I also was very interested in being a paleontologist.
Hmm.
My third, which I never told anybody, but now I think it's hilarious, I wanted to be either a kids show host or a horror host,
Wow. No, I've
which
never heard that from you.
neither of which are jobs.
Right, right.
I mean, you can get the job, but it's from somebody already working at a TV station and say, hey, we'll give you another $20 a week if you can talk to these brats or talk to those weirdos that like this,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So, um, and here I'm working for Svengoolie, so I guess I got my dream in a
Yeah.
way. But yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it. Was just me wanting to stick with the stuff I liked, and no matter which situation I was.
Mhm.
I got in big trouble when I was in kindergarten. I was painted a brontosaurus, and since we had a lot of different paints, I drew a different colored stripe on his tail all the way. He used every color they had to go all the way up his neck. The teacher came by and said, well, dinosaurs didn't look like that. And my answer was, I was very much like Sheldon on the Big Bang Theory. I said, how would you know?
Yeah.
And she took it as if I thought she was stupid. What I was saying is there were no humans back there. How would you possibly know what color?
Right.
She called my parents. Oh, he has an attitude. Same thing happened when they tried to put me in church school and Sunday school. I said, if you want me to believe the stuff in that book, can I believe in the stuff in the books I like? And they said, what books do you like? I said, I like Paul Bunyan. I like Uncle Scrooge. I like, and they said, no,
Yeah.
again, your
Yeah.
son
Yeah.
has an attitude. So, that's just me. I don't go along with, I try to change things, stuff I like. So
But
that's,
you have a point. I will say that, it's not like you're just playing out of left field. I mean, it's like, hey, you're telling me that you want me to like stuff in this book. How about in this book? I like this book.
yeah. And then
So
of course, having the San Diego Zoo, that was really a place where I really grew up.
yeah.
And it was I went down there a couple of months ago and I was crying how great it looks now. It's better than
Hmm.
ever.
Wow.
The animals look more comfortable than they've ever been.
That's cool.
um, it's really well put together. And but that was the big boon for being a kid in San Diego. In Balboa Park, we not only had the zoo, but right almost right next to it was the Museum of Natural History.
Right.
So then I got to see fossils, and it was much easier learning how to draw animals if they were stuffed because they didn't
Right.
move. So I spent a lot of time in both places, and as a kid they were free.
Hmm.
So
I
they just had to drop me off for the day, and they'd pick me up at 6, and I'd go back home.
right. I assume you know some of the basic history about that zoo. I mean, what was it about the San Diego Zoo that made it just from being like a local smallish zoo to being like world renowned?
Because it wasn't a municipal zoo.
Ah, okay.
That's when all the money, whatever they have left over, they'll give you a little tiny slice of.
Yeah.
But the zoo has always had I mean, the early zoo just looked like a joke. It was not a good zoo at all. But by the 40s, they started trading with other zoos. By the 50s, it really broke out with that TV show, Zoorama, which
Hmm.
was syndicated all over America and overseas.
Okay.
And that's really when it really started becoming world famous.
Okay. Because I went to it in the early 70s a few times and it was already pretty, you know, and then years later, I went to the San Francisco Zoo, where I'm from, the Bay Area, and it was terrible. It was just, it's the like how they draw it in the cartoons, where it's cage, cage with cage, 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 animals inside, and they're all kind of miserable and blah. You know, Finally in the '80s, San Francisco Zoo redesigned it quite a bit, made habitats and things like that. And I think that's the way it still is. So at least they advanced it that far. And I think maybe Los Angeles Zoo has also done that too. But yeah, I remember as a kid, yeah, there were just like all these kind of standard zoos. But San Diego Zoo always was like ahead of the game. And then they had the wild animal park added to it later. And I went the first year of that and stuff like that.
The thing
So,
that's amazing about the wild animal park to me is that there were no people of color on the committee that created that,
Hmm.
and yet they decided, let's make this look like an African village,
Hmm.
and they really went to a lot of effort to replicate it perfectly.
Hmm.
That's also when my dad was not only the chief of security at the zoo, but also the wild animal park for the first few years. He overlooked both of them, and he was sitting at the table where they were trying to come up with a name for the electric tram, which was there so that it wouldn't upset people. And everybody's kind of going back and forth. They really don't have ideas. And then the art director for the zoo got up and said, I think we should call it Wagasa. And my dad was sitting right next to him, and he'd been writing and sketching on a yellow pad. And the art director had written in a column, "Who gives a shit anyway?" Wagasa. It finally got in the news, and I've seen it all over the place. But we were the first people to know that because my dad came home and told me, he goes, "Get this," and they finally had to change it because everybody knew what it was.
I never knew that. That's funny.
My wife and son and I got stranded there once because he was still in a stroller.
Yeah. All right. So we're back, and a week later, I'll just say what happened is yes, we got rudely interrupted by Zoom and just cut us off. So, you had something else to say, Scott, before we wrap up.
Well, I think the one thing that's interesting is that for many years, other than at Western Comics, I mean the company, not Western Cowboys, but Western Gold Key Dell, um, they were still about the only ones doing funny animal stuff into the 70s. But when they introduced Howard the Duck, it kind of opened the door for a lot of stuff. I mean, I was asked to be on Quack, and there was also another. It was more underground than that, but it was called No Ducks because everybody was doing ducks at the time.
Yeah.
But more than that, um, I mean, and that was when Howard the Duck was still being done. I think Frank Brunner was doing the thing in the comic,
Right.
but I think it came out not too long after he'd done his, I think maybe issue 3 of Howard the Duck, and I think that was the last one he did.
I believe so.
But suddenly I mean, it opened up a whole thing of funny animals that nobody talked about for a long time. We had Ninja Turtles, we had Captain Carrot, we had a whole wave of funny animal stuff in the 80s that the only one that's left really is the Ninja Turtles.
Hmm.
But Howard the Duck was really the thing that opened up all the interest in all of that because even if it wasn't direct, it set up that yes, people will buy funny animal comics again, just
Hmm.
not the old school type.
Right.
I mean, Gold Key I think lasted into the maybe, well, certainly into the 80s, but by
Yeah, it's like
then sales
84
were
or
not
something like that.
their
Yeah.
sales were not big by
No.
then. And most of their stuff was being reprints by that time.
Right.
But
But
yeah, doing You-All Gibbon was kind of me being washed along with that whole trend at the time, even though I'd already been doing stuff like that on my own.
mhm. And with that and the other urban gorilla and the other characters, I guess did you have a favorite of all those ones that you did over the years?
Well, I wanted to do more urban gorillas, but I just got too busy with my main job as a producer of TV, of cartoon shows.
Mhm.
But now that I'm not working for anybody other than myself, really, I might bring back all those characters.
Hmm.
I mean,
An
I
all ape issue.
I mean, I'm working on a comic right now that's a spin-off of Savage Dragon, but instead of being superhero stuff, it's more like little Archie.
Mm,
And I gave him a pet uh, mutt dog that looks very much like our dog here, so he's kind of a new character too.
hmm
But I like drawing animals,
hmm
and you can exaggerate them much more easily than you can with humans.
hmm
So it's a lot of fun, really. I think I told you I'm introducing a new team of funny animal characters that all have kind of superpowers, but I'm not putting costumes on them because I figure then they don't look nearly as much like animals. So
Right. And you've kind of already done that with Captain Carrot anyway,
yeah,
so
yeah, and frankly, I've got so many characters in the same panel. If I put costuming on them, it'd take me 3 times as long to do it. So this way people can see who's who without any problem.
it'll truly be just a lot of animals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway.
exactly.
All right. Well, just wanted to wrap it up properly, and I'll give you a plug for your Scott Shaw's Comics and Stories again, which is, I think, you're still your latest book.
Yeah, that's my latest, although there's some in the pipeline.
Okay.
But yeah, that definitely has all the printed You-All Gibbons stories.
Okay.
If
So
anybody's interested. And by the way, if you need anything for the article, let me know and I can
oh,
send you some.
definitely. Yeah, I probably will. So yeah, we'll talk afterwards.
Okay, good.
And did you want to plug anything else that you're working on? And if anybody wants to get in contact with you?
Um, I'm still working on some things. The biggest thing I guess I can talk about is that I'll be at San Diego Comic Fest next month.
Hmm.
I think it's October 22nd.
Okay.
So, it's a nice small show. It's more based on the early San Diego cons. No marketing there whatsoever. It's, nothing being promoted that's coming up. It's all looking back at our careers and having interesting people there. So it's more intimate than Comic Con
Very
and
cool.
a fraction of the size intentionally because we don't want to feel like we're choking there.
Hmm.
That was what the creators intended. So
Hmm.
it's more of a vacation con.
Hmm. Is it just all comics? So pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah. I
Well, that's
mean,
good.
occasionally they'll in science fiction writers and stuff. Occasionally they'll have somebody that worked on films, but rather than promoting something that nobody's seen yet, it's more like looking back, explaining how they did that before they had you know digital ways to make things happen. I remember the guy that was the art director on Ghostbusters there was in an early
Hmm.
uh, year of the convention, and it was fascinating, which was much more like we used to be at the early days of Comic Con.
Right. I'm gonna have to go to one of those. I just have not. I've only gone to the big con, but the earliest I went was the early 90s. So it's like I can see how it was a lot smaller, but I know smaller still before that. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah, it's like radioactive material has caused it to grow even more gigantic.
yes. And I haven't been to it in years because it's gotten so huge and I just have not had the time. But, one of these days I might make it down there again. So, yeah.
Now I still go there mainly to see my friends and do the quick draw on the oddball comic show, and frankly, I love talking to the public, especially kids
Hmm.
who like to draw.
All
Always
right.
fun drawing a Sonic on it. Here, take this home. Oh, okay,
I don't
Dad.
want it. I don't want
I
it.
like Sonic.
Actually, I'll ask that quickly before we go. Is like, what's your number one request that people ask you to draw typically?
Either the Flintstones or Sonic.
Very good. I know I've
Yeah,
asked for
and,
Flintstones.
and, and Sonic. least a pleasant looking character. I like drawing him, even though I'm not a rabid Sonic fan. I just don't have time to play video games anymore.
Right. Oh, that's cool. All right. Well, if you want to see this man, it's the incomparable Scott Shaw. He will be at the San Diego Comic Fest.
That's
I don't know
one way
what
to put it. Yeah. How about the incredibly irritating
the
Scott Shaw?
incredibly irritated Scott Shaw. I don't know, who has a wonderful Jack Davis Frankenstein poster in the background, I see, so that's good.
And a
And
Tom Sweeney Devil Dinosaur shirt
yeah,
too.
cool. And if you want to see him in person to have him sign the book or draw a commission for you or just chit chat, uh, go down there and see him in October. And I'll probably see you sometime in the next year or something like that, but we'll keep in touch. And, we're always working on projects together and stuff like that. So,
Yes, we are.
yes. All right. I appreciate it
Okay.
very much, and we'll talk soon. And that wraps up another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Arnold, and I thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.